Okay, if you want to just raise your hand, if there's any questions. Right here.
I have a small question regarding what are the steps to go into this industry for people that coming from the process or from the chemical engineering, chemical industry. Is it common for people from the chemical industry just step in, go into this industry, or are there any, like I think Professor Everett from Australia talked about, like graduation program that let you train yourself and become more proficient for the coming into the industry? So from your knowledge, from other countries, what are the available paths and what are the recommended paths for people with experience?
Please.
Yeah, I spoke to you a bit earlier today. I think it's a very interesting point. When's this all going to happen? I was talking about a long program of conversion to the point where you join and then we can start operating. I think the companies have got to commit to that. As an operations manager, the budget is always challenged. Operations people for more than 1 year in the project, we can't afford that. But I think if you're converting people from other industries, you need 2 or 3 years. So I think you need to look at the plans when Israel really decides what technology is going to be used, and then recruitment should start 3 years ahead of that operating. So for you, chemical industry, fantastic training, very important for the future of the gas industry. People like you hang around, wait till the decisions are made, and then put your hand up, and I'm sure you'll be first in line.
Thank you. I'd like to share with you like a personal experience in Israel is new with this oil and gas industry. And as it grows, there will be many opportunities. And the people who are graduating today have a fantastic opportunity. Like, for example, in Canada, in Alberta, we have more than 3,000 companies that are just oil and gas. And they vary in size from 1 to 10,000 people. And all these businesses support, the smaller businesses supports the mid-size and the large organization. For example, my daughter is a chemical engineer, graduate of Queen's University in Canada, and she works in the regulatory department of Encana, very large gas company in Canada and operates in Canada and the United States. All these companies that start emerging, they need to have expertise to be able to interact with the government and with the public and with the other organizations. And that's exactly what she does. She's an environmental engineer, chemical engineer, and she's in the regulatory department of a very large gas company. Again, as it's not the company didn't create the opportunity because she needs to employ her. The company created the opportunity because the company needs to have expertise to be able to interact with the regulatory bodies, with the government, and with the other organizations in the business. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Adam and David. Brian?
I'll just comment that we produce 150 chemical engineering graduates a year. Of that 150, 20 do a major in oil and gas processing. So they're actually focused on being a major, in the refinery process. And of those 20, there are still some unemployed guys who can't get jobs. Now, you understand most of the jobs, not necessarily with the operator, but on the service side of the industry. And so what a lot of our graduates do, they naturally think they go straight to the operator, but that's not the case anymore. Really, they go to the service industry as opposed to the operator, and there's more chance that they can get into the service industry than the operator. Having said that, the likes of Woodside and others have 2-year graduate entry programs that you rotate around the company for 2 years. So even our chemical engineers who go out and go and join Woodside with an oil and gas major are not practicing chemical engineering. They're going into accounting side and so forth in the rotation, in the 2-year rotation. So don't give up hope that here and now the jobs are lacking. They will come along once the operator and service industry is properly established.
Two things. One, to second what he said, for one of his first comments was when I broke out of college as a petroleum engineer out of the University of Texas, it was kind of a downturn in activity in the States. So unless you had a long-standing internship program with a company coming out of school, it was really hard to get your foot in the door. So my path into Noble was very much like what he discussed, is I broke out with a service company like Halliburton, doing hydraulic fracturing as a service to the operator, and that allowed me to get some skill set underneath my belt to get my foot in the door to an operator like Noble, and now today I'm here. I think the other thing I wanted to point out is you and I discussed a little bit earlier during the first break. Typically, one of the things that Noble does for the engineers straight out of school, regardless of what your degree is, but being hired as an engineer in Noble in the States, is that you enter in our training program, like what he referenced to Woodside. So it's a 3-year program where the individual will spend a year in a different discipline. So you might spend 1 year doing a drilling onshore, inland in our Wattenberg area. You might do another year doing production engineering in the Gulf of Mexico, and then you might do another year doing reservoir engineering for one of our other entities somewhere around the world. And then after that time frame, you've had the experiences, the troubleshooting, the learnings that you've picked up to move on to your full-time role and actually take on that greater responsibility level of being the lead engineer. So that's kind of the approach that we have for our engineers coming out of school in the States. The complication there is here in Israel, we don't have all those different basins for you to go to. I'll bring up one example of a guy that we hired from the Technion last year. He's working for us right now as a production engineer in our office in Herzliya, and he will be going to the States to work for a year or more here in the next couple months to work with engineers there and pick up those other experiences that he's not going to get here to round them out. So I hope that helps.
Very interesting comments. Thank you. I just want to make one small addition, an entrepreneurial comment, because my background into the oil and gas industry was also sort of non-traditional. I graduated from university with a literature degree, which is about as far away as possible as you can get. But the circumstances were such that in Texas we were just coming off of a boom. A bust, and a boom was starting in my hometown in Fort Worth, Texas. We had a huge development, one of the first shale gas developments called the Barnett Shale, and the industry just couldn't get enough people, so they were hiring people out of every kind of industry and just training them as fast as they could. So while I'm sure that they would have preferred people with experience and with proper training and traditional training, when the need is there, the industry is creative and it'll work with what's there. And so if you can show yourself to be flexible and say, I already have these basic skill sets, these basic engineering. I'm a chemical engineer, so I understand, the basic subsets of engineering, or I'm a finance professional, I understand the basics of finance and accounting. Then the industry will work with you, and I think that's a big positive step to have. Is show yourself as being flexible and that you can move around. That's a positive characteristic to have. So, I have a couple of questions down here.
Good afternoon. My name is Mickey Livnat. I own a consulting firm for environmental and safety. I have two questions, but just to stay on the optimistic note here, I did 23 years in the process industry in Israel in the semiconductors and transferred to the natural gas, and within 3 years my hands are full. So there's a lot of work here to be done. two questions. One with regards to CNG. The question is, you mentioned with regard to the price, comparing CNG from Israel to Europe, and I'd like to hear a little bit about the comparison on the pricing between piping, let's say piping to Turkey, and from there sending the gas to Europe versus CNGing it through ships to Italy. The second question is to the person who talked about the training very recently. My understanding that most of the training relates to low pressure, and I'm not sure if there's any kind of training or any plans to do training for high pressure. Those are the two questions.
Thank you for the question. That's a very good question. Normally when a company is looking for a solution, I encourage them that first thing that you should be looking at is a pipeline. If a pipeline can go through, is normally for large volumes, it's very economic. However, sometimes you have, like in subsea conditions, the deep water is expensive to construct a pipeline. Sometimes you have seismic activities in the seabed. And sometimes, I kind of mentioned the example when I was talking about Turkey. I think I'm very clear that a pipeline to Turkey, given the large volumes that Turkey could use, is probably the most economic means. But also you have to deal with the politics. You know, you have to cross the exclusive economic zone of either Cyprus or Syria and Lebanon. And until this situation is resolved, you need to look at other solutions to bring in revenue early. We face many requests from companies that are looking for even transportation by CNG, because there are problems even with the terrestrial pipeline, which is normally even less cost than a subsea pipeline. So you need to look, if you remember the two charts that I had, there's the economic distance for each technology, and this is very generic without talking about any site-specific problems. And once you figure this, you start looking at what is the solution. In terms of shipping gas to Turkey and then from Turkey to Europe, if the pipeline to Turkey is the lowest cost, let's say it's $1.50, $2 per million BTU, you have to figure out where you take it from there, and then the tariffs that will be imposed as the gas goes through different countries. Like, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a concept they call the pancaking concepts, you know, where you stack the pancakes. Every time you go through a territory or a jurisdiction, somebody wants to extract value for transporting the gas. So sometimes there are even artificial tariffs that gets added to the tariff. It makes it expensive to go there. CNG is more expensive than pipeline, but if you do the comparison, you might find that going it from an offshore to a port facility is the lowest cost. Then you get to the last example I will give you about this is, for example, we are looking at maybe transporting gas from Israel to Greece. Some of the industrial users want to get the gas right to their facility onshore. If you do that, you save something, I believe it's $1.40 per million BTU to go through the natural gas system, the DEFSA gas system in Greece. $1.40 is a lot of money to save if you're able to get the right deal with the gas producers. So it's not an easy answer, but normally you need to look at pipeline, you need to look at LNG, you need to look at CNG, and see what is the best netback that you can get, and then from there look at all the political, economic, restriction, regulatory issues that you might face.
Hi, regarding your second question, there is discussion underway in the Natural Gas Authority to see what level of regulatory oversight, and what level of training is required of the transmission and distribution systems. The transmission system requirements, I think, are somewhat different from those of the consumer personnel. And also, we're talking, I think, somewhere in the region of 50 or 60 staff on the operations and maintenance side there. Whereas we're talking, roughly around 1,500 to 1,700 people for the downstream consumers. So I imagine that there probably will not be dedicated training courses for the transmission company. Regarding the distribution companies, talks are underway. Currently, the distribution companies train their own staff and receive sort of nod of that approval from the regulator.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm told, and partially fortunately, that the food is ready. So perhaps we're all more interested in doing that. If you don't mind, you can save questions and visit with everybody at lunch. The experts are going to be among us still. So please come find them at lunchtime, and you can have a more intimate and in-depth conversation. But enjoy your food, and thank you for coming.